Hey, and welcome back to another exciting session of Thoughts in the Woods. And here I am, pretty far in the neck of the woods. In the neck of the woods? What is the neck of the woods? Your neck of the woods? Anyway, and sometimes I have these like really good thoughts, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna put this on a video and whatever. And this time I was kind of like, I don't really have anything to talk about, but I was thinking about something, and it actually came up in a meme that I was flipping around Blue Sky, which, by the way, Blue Sky is freaking awesome. You should all be on Blue Sky if you are looking for a social media platform that is pretty much specifically targeted at whatever your interests are, rather than being smashed ridiculous things that you're not interested in. Whatever your interests are, it's kind of a cool concept. It's actually the concept of social media in general. Anyway, wow, there's a minute gone. Sorry, everybody. Console wars. Whenever I think of the console wars, I always have good memories of the 16-bit, maybe even some of the 8-bit and 32-bit era, but mostly the 16-bit era of like the Super Nintendo, the Genesis, and the TurboGrafx, or Mega Drive, Famicom, Super Famicom, and PC Engine. That 16-bit era, and how tight it was, and how neck and neck Sega and Nintendo, and some NEC in there in the late 80s, but mostly Nintendo and Sega, and how close they were during that era, and like what game, what console was going to land what big game, how their ports of arcade games were, and how they looked, and what games had the best graphics, and what games played the best, the new controllers, like all this stuff, like Street Fighter 2 versus Mortal Kombat, and all that stuff. And there was someone who posted something on Blue Sky about the best-selling consoles of all time. That's come up a lot recently. It was the best-selling consoles of all time, and number one is like the PS2, I think. And then like the Nintendo DS, which I don't even know if I call that a console, that's more of a handheld, but we'll consider it. And Nintendo DS is on there, and Game Boy is on there. And the Switch is a big one that's on there. PS4 is on that list, and all this stuff down the list. And like all the game systems on this top 10 that were like the best selling of all time are game consoles that really dominated the generation that they were in. Like, for instance, the Switch dominates, everything else that it's up against. It's in a weird spot because it's kind of in between consoles releases by Sony and Microsoft, but the Switch is dominating. Then PS2 dominated against the GameCube and the Xbox. The Nintendo DS and the Game Boy, and everything Nintendo did in handhelds really were pretty much unchallenged in terms of other game systems or game companies making a handheld. No one really challenged Nintendo. The PSP was about the closest, because that's like the best-selling non-Nintendo handheld ever created was the PSP. But then towards the bottom of the list, numbers, I think 7, 8, and 9 for best-selling consoles of all time, in order, was Nintendo Wii, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360. And I was thinking about that, like every other game system on this is like the only one of its generation to be the best selling. But 7, 8, and 9, those are all systems that were in one generation. And that generation was the Wii came out in 2006, the PS3 came out in 2006, and then a year prior to that was the 360. And those three systems went on it for years. I remember initially the PS3 sold really poorly because it was too high priced. They remanufactured it. They made new systems that were less backwards compatible with like the PS1, it was PS2. The PS2, they took backwards compatibility out of it, and they made like different versions of it. It was also the first console to ever have Blu-ray players, and that kind of put Blu-ray on the map when the PS3 eventually got it right and like re-released a different version, like the Slim model or whatever. And it was such a tight race towards the end there of all those consoles, because initially the Wii just took off like crazy. Everybody had to have a Wii. The Wii was the newest thing in town. It was this cool new concept. It was basically like a toy that was a video game console. Like, it was just crazy. And I enjoy the Wii. I enjoy the Wii, I enjoy the 360, and I enjoy the PS3. Like, that's one generation where all those options that you had in the mid-2000s were all wins. Like, if you only could afford one system, no matter which one you got, you were happy. Like, every one of them had its pros, had some cons, but mostly like there's such a huge library of games to have for any one of those systems. You were going to win. It was win-win. It was awesome. Nintendo Wii, at the worst case scenario, had a huge, amazing virtual console game market, and then WiiWare came in, so it was like their online games, downloading games was great. Sony had the PlayStation exclusives, a lot of really great games. A Blu-ray player was attached to it. The Xbox 360 had its insane game, Xbox Live, where you could play online with friends. Like, so it was just like such a huge generation. That was like such a giant generation. I think it was like the Wii had 100 million sales. PS3 had 87 million sales. The Xbox 360 had something 82 or 84 million sales. Like, it was just crazy. Like, all three of those consoles kind of lived in harmony for one generation. They were all super successful. And I mean, that was really the last time Xbox really was super successful, because the Xbox One, the Xbox Series X, again, I mean, what are they doing? I don't know. And the PS4 and the PS4 sold better than the PS3, so they've actually increased their sales, and the Switch did better than the Wii. But anyway, is that generation, that one generation right there, is that the best console wars generation ever? From 2005 to like 2012 or 2013, when the PS3s and 4s and stuff, with the PS4 and the Xbox One, I kind of think it was. So like those 6 years there, was that the best console generation war ever? That's my question to you. In my heart, it will always be the 16-bit wars. It'll always be Sega and Nintendo on the schoolyard. You know, when I was growing up, it's like, you have a Genesis? No, I got a Super Nintendo. Oh, right on. You know, like, oh. So, tell me your thoughts. My phone's ringing.